I stumbled upon a highly upvoted post by accident. Slept with my friend's fiancée. Intense. In the image, a man's fingers were holding a black lace thong. The scars on his fingers were identical to those of my friend Pete. And that thong? It belonged to my fiancée, hanging out on the balcony right now. 5 minutes ago, I was scrolling through a forum when I came across a question: what's the most thrilling thing you've ever done? The first highly upvoted reply came with a picture that sent a chill down my spine. My hand, holding the phone, trembled slightly as I stared at the image. Terrified of missing any small detail. Black, lace, size M, with a small thread sticking out from the waistband. The same damn thong was clearly hanging on my balcony. Half a month ago, when I was picking up laundry, I noticed a set of freshly washed lingerie. It was bold, not at all like what my fiancée Becky usually wore. I asked her about it, and her face turned red as she stammered, Where did you find this? I thought I'd surprise you, isn't your birthday coming up? I figured, you guys like this kind of style, right? So I bought it. At the time, I was both happy and guilty. Thinking her awkwardness was just because I'd caught her in the act of setting up a surprise. I didn't even notice the strange way she said, you guys. I saw the thread sticking out from the waistband and felt a little sorry for it. Next time, just buy something higher quality. Don't be shy to use my credit card. She nodded obediently, then reached into the drawer to grab scissors, cutting off the thread, leaving just a tiny stub. Looking back now, I realized that whenever she used my card, she didn't hesitate. So why would she hesitate over a pair of panties? Unless she didn't want me to catch her. If the style could be repeated, then this small thread left behind almost confirmed Becky's guilt. My mind went completely blank, buzzing. It was Becky who pursued me in the first place, and even after we got together, our relationship was always good. Deep down, I never wanted to believe she could do something like this. Maybe it's just a coincidence. After all, there are a lot of coincidences in the world. I clicked on the guy's profile and started scrolling from his most recent post, hoping to find some piece of evidence to contradict what I was seeing. But the more I scrolled, the more desperate I became. After filtering out irrelevant posts, I realized they'd been up to something from the very first time they met. The first post: what should I do if I kind of like my friend's fiancé? The picture was of a woman's back, her figure resembling Becky's. The background of the photo was the restaurant where I'd first introduced them. The second post: I think I really like my friend's fiancé. The third post: my friend's fiancé has such an amazing body. I can't stand it. The picture was of a side profile, strikingly similar to Becky's. The fourth post: didn't expect my friend's fiancé to have feelings for me too, this is thrilling. The fifth post: dreams come true, we had sex. The picture was of a bed, a woman lying on her side. The bracelet on her wrist was identical to the one Becky wore. The sixth post: unlocked a new location, new position, on my friend's couch. The picture was of a messy couch, exactly the same color and style as the one Becky and I picked out at the furniture store. The seventh article is the one I just saw, with a massive number of comments. Each post was met with endless gossip from users, most of whom were envious, while a small minority expressed disgust. If the underwear coincidence could be written off as chance, then every other detail in the picture screamed that the fiancée in question was Becky. No wonder, just a few days ago, Becky had ordered 3 boxes of condoms online. I jokingly asked her if she was planning to wear me out. She laughed and jumped into my arms. You have 1 month to use them up. Or I'll give them to someone else. I thought it was just playful banter. Turns out, she'd let the truth slip disguised as a joke. As for that man, he was easier to identify. He was my college classmate Pete. The reason I even noticed the post was because the red scar on the guy's index finger matched Pete's exactly. If I hadn't sensed something was off, I'd probably have shared the post with Pete and joked around with him. I'd asked Pete about that scar before. He'd said it came from a childhood injury while helping his family with work. Back in college, I knew his family struggled. And I'd helped him out more than once. I even helped him get his current job. I never imagined that while I thought of him as a friend, he'd be sleeping with my fiancée. The double betrayal left me devastated, as if I'd been dropped into an ice-cold pit. After a brief moment of calm, only one thought filled my mind. I was going to make them wish they were never born. That night, when Becky came home from work, she kicked off her shoes and immediately threw herself into my arms. As she raised her arm, a red mark on her lower back caught my eye, identical to the one in the photo. Usually, I would hold her tightly, showering her with concern and questions. But tonight, I did nothing. Becky froze, as if sensing my unusual behavior. She cautiously asked, George, what's wrong? I shook my head, pushing her away. Nothing. Just tired. The emotions I was holding back pressed against my chest as I walked out to the balcony, pulling out a cigarette and lighting it. Above me, the black lace thong fluttered in the wind, a constant reminder of my humiliation. If it weren't illegal to hit someone, I'd want to throw a punch right at it. But just hitting her wouldn't even begin to scratch the surface of my anger. Watching Becky walk toward me, concern etched on her face, I couldn't help but sneer inside. How good of an actress does one have to be to cheat on her fiancé with his best friend, while acting all worried and sweet at home? It's a shame the Oscars never gave her an award. You've always said this kind of underwear was uncomfortable. Why is it I keep seeing you wear it lately? Becky preferred silk, something soft and skin-friendly. And she'd always said this type of underwear was too tight to wear regularly, only in bed. She paused for a moment, then answered calmly, I didn't want them to mildew, and since I bought them, I might as well wear them. No point in wasting them. Everything she owned was high-end. There's no way she'd wear something of this quality unless Pete bought it. And unless he liked it. Faced with the lie that was so close to being exposed, Becky lied with such ease. As if it were second nature. She had clearly done this far too many times. The girl who used to blush just from holding hands was long gone. I stubbed out the cigarette, then calmly said, I had the housekeeper make a big dinner. A friend's coming over later. Becky blinked. Who? Before she could finish the sentence, there was a knock at the door. When Becky opened the door and saw Pete, her eyes were filled with surprise, but that quickly faded into a scowl. It turns out that if you pay attention, these little cracks are everywhere. Pete was wearing a deep gray wool coat today, with a dark brown turtleneck peeking out from under it. His hair was neatly styled, making him look quite put together. He rarely dressed up before, usually just throwing on a hoodie and heading out with messy hair. That's why Becky always complained about him, saying he looked scruffy. Wow, you're all dressed up. Got a date today? Pete flashed me a grin. Come on, don't joke around. You know what I usually look like. I just thought I'd clean up a little to see you, so you doesn't call me a slob again. His words were clever. Becky would think he'd dressed up for her. While I would catch the dig about how Becky had always criticized him. Indeed, every time they met, they were always at odds. This was why I had never suspected anything between them. As expected, Becky's lips couldn't help but curl up slightly, but she shot Pete a sharp look. No matter how you dress, you can't hide that smell. You probably haven't showered in days. Pete looked at me, clearly caught off guard, and said with an exasperated smile, George, can you hear what Becky's saying? Every time I see her, it's just a barrage of insults. How do you stand her sharp tongue? The two of them played off each other, looking like they were at each other's throats, but in reality, they were subtly flirting. I ignored the undercurrent of tension between them, instead admiring their acting skills. After a few rounds of drinks, I sent the housekeeper home and, as I stood up, deliberately spilled some wine on myself. I made an excuse to change, heading upstairs to the room. Once inside, I eagerly pulled out the phone I'd set up for surveillance. Earlier that day, I'd bought a few hidden cameras, 3 in total, providing a full view of the entire living room. In the footage, I'd just entered the room, and they could hardly contain themselves. Becky got up and wrapped her arms around Pete's shoulders from behind. Dressed up so nicely today, are you trying to seduce me? Pete stood up, grabbing her wrist and pinning her against the wall, then lowered his head to kiss her. They acted like this was their own home, with Pete growing increasingly bold, his hands wandering. The intimate scene, their lips locked, their breaths shallow, was captured frame by the cameras. Even though my feelings for them had turned to pure disgust, seeing this degrading display in person was hard to stay calm about. The only silver lining was that I had set the recording up earlier. Becky and Pete's affair was now inescapably documented. As I made my way downstairs, I deliberately cleared my throat a couple of times to remind the adulterous couple that it was time to pull back. Sure enough, when I reached the living room, they were sitting properly, each in their respective seats. Although they had tidied themselves up, there were still traces of what had just happened, like the lipstick on Becky's lip, not fully wiped off. I raised my hand and gently wiped it away. Becky, clearly flustered, quickly explained, the food was so good today, I guess I ate it and smeared my lipstick. Pete chimed in, you're calling me a slob? Looks like you're not much better. I listened impassively, almost unable to suppress a cold laugh. If I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, I wouldn't have been able to imagine that the same two people who were just kissing passionately were now bickering like this. I sat down at the head of the table and said seriously, "Becky and I have set our wedding date, it's next Saturday." The moment the words left my mouth, both of their faces changed in an instant. Becky instinctively stood up, her face filled with shock. "George, didn't you say your family didn't approve? Why are you rushing this now?" Pete, though surprised, also agreed. "You and Becky have been together for so long. It's about time you two got married." Becky looked at Pete in disbelief, and then her eyes reddened. I feigned ignorance and asked, "What's wrong? Getting married is a good thing. Why are you crying?" Becky, caught off guard, quickly composed herself. "It's just so sudden. I got too carried away with happiness. My parents had always opposed my relationship with Becky, but I stubbornly insisted on being with her. As I reached the age to marry, my parents reluctantly gave their approval, setting the wedding for next year. Secretly hoping we'd break up before then. My parents built their wealth from the ground up, and they've seen all kinds of people in their lives. They didn't like Becky, maybe they'd already seen what kind of person she was. But back then, love clouded my judgment, and I went against my parents to be with her." Pete's attitude was a bit of a surprise to me. Though he seemed shocked, there was a subtle excitement in his tone about our marriage. After dinner, Becky took the initiative to offer to walk Pete downstairs. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, watching everything unfold through the slit in the curtain. "You don't love me anymore. Hearing George say they're getting married next week, you seem even happier than he does." Pete pulled the sulking Becky into his arms. "Of course not, I'm just trying to make sure he doesn't notice anything off. Don't think so much. I only love you." The handsome man and beautiful woman embraced passionately, looking like a couple who'd just had a petty fight and made up. If the woman wasn't my fiancée and the man wasn't my close friend, I might have thought the same. How long had it been since I saw Becky's shy, vulnerable expression like that? She had changed over the days we spent together, and I had been too blind to notice. I watched coldly, taking a photo of the two of them hugging. That night, Pete couldn't wait to post an update. "My friend and his fiancée are getting married. Little does he know, I've slept with that woman countless times. When the time comes, I will plant a seed in his wife's belly, and all his properties will belong to my son. Thinking about it makes me even more excited." Most of the comments were people enjoying the drama, with a few calling him despicable. He responded carelessly, "Luxury homes, a beautiful wife, a career. Why does he get everything just because he was born into it? I'm just as good as he is." No wonder Pete was happier when he heard that Becky and I were moving up the wedding date. Turns out, he had this in mind all along. Not only was he coveting my wife, but he also had his eyes on my family's wealth. I had helped him so much, what a perfect farmer and snake situation. From his words, it was clear that Pete didn't have much real affection for Becky. His feelings for her were mostly about using her and satisfying his physical desires. The wedding was a grand affair, with both sides of our families and friends in attendance. I invited all of her distant relatives and even her entire class. The big screen displayed sweet photos of Becky and me, creating a warm, romantic atmosphere. I stood across from her, tears streaming down my face as I recited one heartfelt declaration of love after another. With my usual attentive care toward Becky, the deep loving image I had worked hard to cultivate was firmly established. Becky was so moved by my words that tears fell from her eyes. When it was her turn to speak, my phone rang from my pocket. I pretended to check it, turning off the alarm I had set earlier, my expression gradually darkening. Everyone noticed my serious demeanor, exchanging confused looks. I glanced up at Becky and then walked over to her parents. The wedding can't go on. They knew that Becky marrying me was a huge stroke of luck for their entire family. During our relationship, they had reaped many benefits from me, including helping Becky's younger brother, Robert, get a job. Hearing that the wedding was in jeopardy, her parents immediately rushed to ask what had happened. I didn't answer them, instead lifting my phone and projecting the video onto the large screen behind me. In the video, Becky and a man were on a large bed, engaged in a passionate embrace. The surroundings indicated it was a hotel room. The camera was positioned above them, showing only Becky's face, with the man's face hidden. Shameful sounds echoed throughout the entire hall. I paused the video, freezing the frame that clearly showed Becky's face. Becky froze, her voice trembling as she blurted out, "Who filmed this? Of course, it was me. Even in the days leading up to the wedding, their affair had continued. I had already figured out the hotel they frequented, and with a little bribe, the front desk had cooperated by giving me the room where I planted the camera. After they had finished, I quietly retrieved the device. I certainly wouldn't admit it. Holding the microphone, I put on an expression of deep sorrow. Dear friends and family, I just received a video from an unknown number. I'm sure you all saw it. I never imagined that my most trusted fiancée, Becky, would betray me like this. One sentence from me placed me firmly on the moral high ground. The crowd below erupted into chaos. Damn! How can Becky be so shameless? George treats her so well, and she's still not satisfied. She wants love, but can't let go of George's money. Disgusting. Such a woman just craves excitement. It's a good thing they didn't get married. Becky trembled, nearly losing her balance. Her brother Robert, feeling embarrassed, stormed off, abandoning her. Her father couldn't hold back anymore and slapped her hard across the face. The slap was full of force, and Becky's cheek immediately swelled up. You ungrateful fellow. Our good days were thanks to George. If he doesn't marry you, don't even think about coming back home. Her mother, embarrassed and angry, threw herself at my feet, grabbing my pants. George, please forgive Becky this once. She must have been deceived by that man. You two have been together for so many years. And now you're so close to getting married. Don't give up so easily. With that, she dragged Becky over and both of them kneeled before me, her mother pressing Becky's head to the ground, repeatedly bowing. Becky's forehead was swollen, and the makeup on her face had clumped together, leaving her looking utterly disheveled. George, I was wrong. Please forgive me just this once. I was deceived. I love you. Please give me another chance. I beg you. Love? If she truly loved me, how could she keep crawling into my best friend's bed over and over? The day before the wedding, they had another round of their affair in a hotel. If this is her idea of love, then I'm not interested in such love. Seeing her family in such a miserable state, I couldn't help but feel a twisted satisfaction. I fought to hold back the urge to laugh and massage my forehead, putting on a tired and sorrowful expression. You all know my parents have never agreed with my marriage to Becky. And now, with all this happening, we will never allow a woman like this into our family. I squatted down and pulled a bank card from Becky's father's chest pocket. 1 million. I'll have to take this back. You've all seen the scale of the wedding. It's been costly. Considering Becky has been with me for so many years, I won't ask for any more money from you. Becky's family watched helplessly as I took the card back. The feeling of gaining and then losing it only deepened their anger toward Becky. In their shame and rage, they immediately declared Becky to be kicked out of the family. That night, I met Pete for drinks. When he arrived, his expression was awkward, and he couldn't bring himself to meet my eyes. I never expected Becky to be this kind of person, he said, immediately criticizing Becky. I clenched my glass, the ice cold like the state of my heart. I held back the urge to punch him and, with a hoarse voice, said, "Friends are the best. They never betray me." Pete's hand trembled as he held his glass, and he quickly looked away, lowering his head. Women are like clothes, but friends are like brothers. I burst into laughter, mocking his shamelessness and myself for ever becoming friends with someone like him. He hesitated for a moment, looking somewhat nervous, and then downed the last of his whiskey in one gulp. George. Do you know who that man is? I looked at him with a half-smile, staying silent for a long time. Long enough for Pete to feel uncomfortable, squirming in his seat. When I finally spoke, my voice was low, trembling. What's wrong, George? Is there something on my face? I shook my head, defeated. I don't know. If I know the identity of that man, I won't let him off easily. Pete visibly relaxed and said, "That guy got off easy." I sneered, "Yeah. You got a bargain." Pete's eyes widened, and he waved his hands frantically. "George, what are you talking about? I and Becky, no. I've never gotten along with Becky. You know that. We've been friends for so many years. How could I do something so heartless?" So he knew that his actions wouldn't hold up under scrutiny. Seeing him break into a cold sweat and desperately try to defend himself, I felt a sense of twisted enjoyment. He must be panicking inside. I chuckled, "Why are you so anxious? You're my friend. Why would I suspect you?" His face was filled with confusion, his heart racing. So what did you mean when you said it was a bargain for me? I sighed, leaning back in my chair. One of my friends is going back to her home country, and I was thinking of introducing her to you. Pete looked skeptical. Introduce her to me? I nodded, pretending to be incredibly serious. Although my love life is a disaster, I really hope yours goes smoothly. Hers quite wealthy, so you'd better make the most of it. Don't let good opportunities slip by. The moment Pete laid eyes on Jessica Whitney, his eyes lit up. It was their first meeting, and Jessica was wearing a black spaghetti-strap dress, tight-fitting and sleek, perfectly outlining her graceful figure. Pete had heard me mention Jessica Whitney before. He knew she was not only wealthy but also stunningly beautiful. The key point was that she was the only daughter of the Whitney family. Whoever married her would inherit the entire Whitney family business. Pete never dreamed that he'd actually meet Jessica in person. When Jessica saw us, she casually sat down. So, this is the handsome guy you wanted to introduce me to? He's good-looking and seems honest. He'd make a great boyfriend. Her praise and approval left Pete dumbfounded. Just 3 days ago, he'd been all over Becky, and now, 3 days later, he was already infatuated with a woman he had just met. Clearly, his feelings for Becky weren't very deep. And that fool Becky, still thinking she had found true love, was truly laughable. I could understand Pete's choice, though. After seeing Becky's true colors, I suddenly felt that both her looks and personality were quite ordinary. I couldn't even remember what had attracted me to her in the first place. On the other hand, Jessica, raised as a precious only daughter, carried herself with an air of nobility and elegance. Her personality also very easygoing. In terms of looks, personality, and family background, she easily outshone Becky. The two of them were chatting away, and no matter what Jessica said, Pete was always flattering her. Before long, they had exchanged social media accounts. Mr. Pete, although you're unmarried, I still have to ask, you don't have a girlfriend or some mistress, do you? You know, the Whitney family has strict requirements for the future heir. Pete quickly stood up and explained, no, don't worry. Miss Jessica. I'm the type who only focuses on work. I've never been in a relationship, let alone have a mistress. If you don't believe me, ask George. I couldn't help but sneer inwardly. 10 days ago, Pete truly was that kind of person in my eyes. But hearing him say this now, I just found it laughable. However, I wouldn't expose him. It's true, I've seen it with my own eyes. After dinner, Jessica offered to give Pete a ride home. I sat alone in a cafe. I checked the time, it should be about done by now. Sure enough, not long after, I received a message. It was a video. The thumbnail showed Pete, coldly standing with his hands in his pockets, while Becky, standing in front of him, was crying, holding bags and looking completely devastated. As soon as I opened the video, I could hear Becky's sobs. Who was the woman who just sent you home? I've been so good to you, I even gave up on marriage for you. And you? After just a few days, you're already falling for another woman? When you seduced me into bed, you clearly said you loved me. Because I was afraid George would find out, do you know how anxious I was every day? It was so hard for us to be together, how could you just break up with me like that? Pete, who had just dreamt of marrying Jessica, now saw Becky as worthless, even a burden. He was eager to get rid of her, and his words were cruel. Don't try to pin this on me. If you hadn't slept with me, would George have called off the engagement? Stop blaming me. I've got a better option now. Jessica's more beautiful and richer than you. If I marry her, I can skip right to the top. Get the hell out of here. If she sees you, you'll ruin my good future with her. I won't forgive you. A woman's jealousy is terrifying, and she stared at him with burning eyes. Pete, I never thought you were this kind of person. Wait for it, I'm going to tell George who the real cheater is. By then, don't even think about marrying Jessica, George won't spare you. This was Pete's worst fear. He slapped her, and Becky's face was instantly turned to the side. If you dare to say anything, I'll kill you. But Becky wasn't afraid at all. Go ahead, kill me. We'll both die together. Jessica sat down across from me and ordered a coffee. Did you see the video I sent you? If she's pregnant, things are going to get complicated. I shook my head. It's not complicated. The child isn't mine. I've always been cautious with contraception when I was with Becky, and besides, I haven't had sex with her in over a month. When I got home that evening, I noticed Pete had deleted all posts related to Becky. It seemed like he was a bit scared of me finding out, and even more scared of this becoming known to Jessica. A few days later, Becky was standing at my door early in the morning, dragging her luggage and looking pitiful. As soon as she saw me, she knelt down. "George. I'm sorry. I was just seeking excitement for a moment. The one I love is always you. That man seduced me first, please forgive me. From now on, it's only you. We can have a child and live a peaceful, simple life. Is that okay?" At first, I thought she had nowhere to go and was asking me to take her back. But when I heard her say, "have a child," I realized what she was really up to. I thought Pete would be torn between choosing to marry Jessica and reach the peak of his life or staying with Becky and their child. What I didn't expect was that he wanted both. Help him raise the child? He must be dreaming. I pushed Becky's hand away and asked coldly, "Who's the man?" She must have planned this little act with Pete behind my back. Sure enough, she put on a reluctant face and slowly spoke. "I met him online. I don't even know his name. I deleted all his contact information. George, I can't lose you." I smiled and nodded. Did she still think she could hide the truth at this point? They probably never expected that I had known who the man was from the very beginning. Watching Becky perform like a clown, trying to appear weak and pleasing to me. I might have felt sorry for her before, but now all I felt was indifference. I looked down at her with contempt. "I'm a clean freak. I can't stand dirty things. I won't take you back. Get that into your head and get as far away as possible." After Becky left, I called Jessica and quietly followed her. I saw her get into a taxi and stop downstairs at Pete's company. "How did it go? Did George believe you?" Becky shook her head. "He asked me who the man was." Pete immediately tensed. "Did you tell him?" Jessica had been getting along well with him these past few days. And he was immersed in his dream of marrying her, unwilling to let anything go wrong. "No," Becky said, with red eyes, throwing herself into his arms. "I couldn't marry George because of you, and now my parents have kicked me out of the house. I have nothing left. You can't just leave me." Pete pushed her away in disgust. His mind was full of calculations. With Becky no longer useful and a big trouble, he naturally wouldn't keep her around. "What's it to me? You were careless and got caught by him. I haven't even settled the score with you yet. Jessica is very satisfied with me. If you ruin my chances now, don't blame me for being rude." Inside the car, Jessica glanced at me. "Your taste really is poor, friends full of schemes, girlfriends with loose morals. I used to like you so much, chasing you around. But you? You were so focused on Becky, not even glancing at me." I blinked innocently. I was blind back then. She chuckled, then turned her attention back to the two outside. I saw Becky so angry that she could barely stand straight, shouting at Pete. "This is your own child. How can you be so heartless? I really was blind to have ever liked you. You've ruined me, and now you want to marry Jessica and live a good life? Dream on. If you won't let me live, don't expect to have a good life yourself." After finishing her rant, Becky turned and ran. Pete, panicked, slammed his fist on the ground. Seeing this ridiculous scene, I couldn't help but laugh. Jessica, seeing me laugh, smiled too. "It's been so many days, and finally, I see you smile." Jessica's family and mine have known each other for years. I'm 2 years older than her. And we grew up together, childhood sweethearts. I'm a quiet person, while she's the life of the party, always making me laugh until my stomach hurts. But maybe we'd grown too close, and I always thought of her as a little sister. Now, after 3 years, I saw her again and realized she had blossomed into a beautiful young woman. Especially when she was in front of Pete, with her enchanting charm, any man would fall for her. Jessica stroked her chin thoughtfully. "What do you think they'll do next?" I started the car and let out a cold laugh. "What else can they do? Perish together." Becky quickly added Jessica on social media. Jessica frowned. "Who is this? Adding me without even knowing me?" I had a feeling. Becky must be coming to complain. After they became friends, Becky got straight to the point. "I'm Becky. The man I cheated with is George's good friend Pete. Isn't your Whitney family known for carefully selecting son-in-laws? Surely you wouldn't let someone who betrays his best friend into your family, right?" Jessica slowly raised her thumb. "You're impressive. It really is Becky complaining. It wasn't that I was particularly clever. But Becky had copied all the social media accounts of my female friends, and any that seemed like a threat, she deleted. So if she wanted to contact Jessica, this was her only way. It's kind of funny, really, she's out there having fun with men, while I couldn't even keep a female friend. Jessica's fingers were quick as she typed, "No evidence, do you really think I'll believe you?" Becky immediately sent a few photos, all intimate pictures of her with Pete. Jessica quickly merged the photos and forwarded them to Pete. "You can find women, fine, but finding your friend's woman? Don't contact me again. I find people like you disgusting." Then she blocked and deleted him. Pete saw the message, and when he couldn't reach Jessica, he actually called me. I answered, hung up, then blocked and deleted him too. Jessica sneered. "He must be freaking out." I snorted. "Freaking out doesn't matter as long as he doesn't take it out on us. Now, let's just sit back and enjoy the show." The next evening, when I returned home, the housekeeper mysteriously told me, "Pete came this morning. I followed your instructions and didn't let him in." But later Becky showed up. Her face was so cold, she dragged Pete away. I took the utensils in my hand and ate heartily. Maybe because I was in a good mood, the food tasted especially good. "I don't want to see them. Tomorrow, go to the property management office and tell the gatekeepers not to let them in. Stay away from them, and life will be peaceful." I didn't expect my wish to be granted so quickly. I never saw them again, forever. Not long after the incident, Jessica got the latest information. Her family's main business was in media. So they were always sensitive to social hot topics. Becky and Pete jumped off a bridge. Then she sent a surveillance video. In the video, the quiet and cold bridge at night, Pete angrily dragging Becky along while she looked cold and dark. They walked to the middle of the bridge, and Pete kept yelling. Although we couldn't hear the words, we could guess he was furious because of Becky's accusation. I don't know what he said, but it clearly hurt Becky deeply. Suddenly, Becky looked up and pushed Pete off the bridge. By the time Pete realized what was happening, it was too late. He could only watch as he fell off the bridge. The street below wasn't busy, but every so often, a large truck would pass. It was just bad luck for Pete, he died on impact. Becky laughed a few times, then without hesitation, climbed over the railing and jumped. She landed on the truck's body and barely survived. Now, lying in the ICU, even if she survives, she'll never walk again, and her mind has been shattered, she's gone crazy. Her parents and brother Robert no longer acknowledge her as family. And she'll probably spend the rest of her life in a psychiatric hospital. Jessica asked me, "Are you going to visit her?" I was silent for a few seconds, no. Becky chased after true love, Pete chased after flesh and fortune, and together they destroyed my 8 years of love. In the end, with their dreams of love and wealth shattered, they turned on each other, one is broken, the other dead. Why should I feel sorry for them? This is just the consequence of their own actions. In the following year, I focused on my career and had long forgotten about Becky and Pete. The family business was running smoothly under my management, and our annual profits had increased by 10%. My father was very pleased and, on the spot, rewarded me with a matchmaking session. Standing outside the cafe, I hesitated, wondering whether I should go in. In the end, I decided to go through with it, just to get it over with. To my surprise, when I opened the door, I saw Jessica sitting by the window. She wore a white blouse and a black skirt, with long hair like ink and skin as fair as snow. She had clearly seen me too and stood up, smiling at me. I raised my hand in greeting. "Jessica? What are you doing here?" She stretched out her hand in all seriousness. "Hello, I'm Jessica." I couldn't help but laugh. She was still as playful and cute as ever. The sunlight filtered through the window, warming us both. I cleared my throat, then seriously shook her hand. "Hello, Miss Jessica. My name is George. It's an honor to become your boyfriend." The clouds parted, and the sunshine was just right. The rest of my life was long. And every day ahead was worth looking forward to.